there'll be showers in Blackburn. It's pouring in Cheshire, and there's even the odd spot in
Penrith, Borrowdale,
Ambleside,
Manchester, Liverpool,
Preston, Macclesfield and Rayno, even Rayno, Morecambe and Blackpool.
wherever you are, whatever you need. Around 7 million people in the Northwest rely on us every day. Northwest Water, clearly for you.
What you got? Ketchips. What chip? Ketchips.
Real potato.
And ketchup. So what? Ketchup's on the inside. Inside, not outside.
funny shape, this ketchup.
Not here. Tis here.
Mantis.
Crunchy.
Potato. Ketchup. Not a fiddle.
Ketchup in the middle.
Right up in the middle. Oh, fluffy, crispy.
Potato.
Ketchips, new from Birdseye.
There's a great new cereal from Kellogg's that's just for kids. Big kids. New Kellogg's Toppas. Grown-up shredded whole wheat with a yummy, scrummy sweet topping on the top. New Kellogg's Toppas. For the big kid in you.
Now the kids have gone, this is ideal, don't you think?
Oh, that's nice.
And there's the profit on our old place to put in the bank.
Oh, bank account's not the only place we could put it.
Oh, where else?
There's investment bonds, unit trusts, even a personal pension.
At Prudential Property Services, you have free access to a qualified financial advisor because there's more to moving home than just buying and selling houses. Prudential Property Services, Britain's leading estate agent.
She's new.
Maria? Yes, last girl left to get married.
Excellent coffee, Maria. You must be an expert.
It's not me. Nescafé are the experts. They use only the finest coffee beans, specially blended and roasted.
That must be what gives it such a rich, smooth taste.
Yes. I'm surprised you're not knowing this. I thought everybody knew about Nescafé.
Whatever you're paying her, it's not enough.
Nescafé, coffee at its best.
Entertainment for Wednesday night here on Granada. At 7:30, Bet and Alec at war in Coronation Street.
You cannot live under my roof and deny me clean shirts.
You know what the iron is?
Look, I feel like a tramp.
At 8, teasing questions for those fit and witty teams in Sporting Triangles.
I'm going to take an absolute flyer on this.
At 8:30, a clash with authority in No Strings.
Mrs. Tyndall is a very nice woman who's been cruelly used.
I had to sell your father's golf clubs to pay for this.
What happens if he comes back?
You'll have to tee off without them.
At 9, a classic mystery as Sherlock Holmes comes to the rescue of a damsel in distress.
It is certain, therefore, that your sister was alone when she met her end.
Holmes the meddler. Holmes the busybody.
At 10:45, Midweek Sports Special presents international soccer with the European Cup final from Nou Camp Stadium, Barcelona. With entertainment taking you through the night, this is Wednesday here on Granada.
£14,300 for a teapot. This famous item turns up in Something to Treasure. The guest collector is Derek Nimmo, who's keen on Derby porcelain. Something to Treasure in 30 minutes. Now the news. First from ITN. The national time is 1 o'clock.
Interest rates go up again, but building societies say they can wear it. Police warn of more drug riots like last night in Wolverhampton. And what's Frank Bruno doing on the London stage? He'll be telling us. Hello, I'm John Suchet. Welcome to News at 1. Interest rates are up again for the 10th time in a year. The cost of borrowing is now 14%. But mortgages appear to be safe. The building societies have confirmed what we reported yesterday. They are prepared to absorb the increase. Today's move comes only days after inflation reached 8%. That and the increase in interest rates were caused by a weak pound. After losing value daily against the dollar, sterling steadied this morning, but share values fell by £5.3 billion. This time last year, the base rate stood at 7.5%. By November, it was 13%, and today's rise is the 10th since last June. Here's Hugh Pym.
City dealing screens flashed red, indicating that share prices were tumbling after the announcement of a rise in interest rates. An increase seemed likely after the pound started to fall sharply on Monday. It fell further when Mrs Thatcher appeared to suggest yesterday that rates would not rise. This morning, the authorities decided the rot had to stop.
Well, I thought it was a welcome move by the Chancellor. It has helped to restore some of his tattered credibility, and it has prevented what would have been a big run on sterling. So to prevent a sterling crisis, it was quite right that he should put rates up.
The pound steadied on the news but has not moved ahead significantly. Its progress is at the mercy of international developments on interest rates as well. The city may have been pleased, but it's a different story for homeowners who've seen mortgage rates rise sharply over the last year. The building societies will try to hold mortgages despite today's news on bank base rates.
If interest rates were to go up again, we would obviously have to reconsider the position. And if these present higher rates were to obtain for a very long time, we'd have to reconsider as well. But we can certainly hold this rate for a few months.
But consumer spending's already been hit by 13% interest rates. The new 14% level will not be welcomed by industry. If it holds, it'll push the economy further towards recession. The test now for the Chancellor is whether 14% interest rates are enough to hold the pound. A poor set of trade figures tomorrow might provoke another bout of sterling selling, and Mr Lawson may feel he has to increase interest rates again. Hugh Pym, ITN, The City.
Although Mrs Thatcher and the Chancellor decided on the interest rate rise in principle yesterday, the Prime Minister made no direct reference to it in a speech this morning. She stuck instead to the usual and well-tried formula about interest rates in general.
We need a period of high interest rates to bring inflation down. And while the effects can be uncomfortable, the effects of continued high inflation could be much worse, and they would last much longer.
Visiting the conference creche later, Mrs Thatcher was still emphasising the fight against inflation.
I'm so sorry.
The interest rates had to go up.
Well, yes, had to. It's part of our strategy to keep inflation down.
How long would they stay up?
That one never knows.
The Chancellor's advisers were stressing this morning that with domestic demand already down, the main reason for the rise was the run on the pound. But Labour said international market pressure alone wasn't the reason for what had happened.
No, I don't think this is the consequence of international movements, which have nothing to do with the handling of the British economy. It is a clear sign of lack of confidence in the handling of the British economy by this government on two specific items. Inflation, which as everyone knows is rising faster than he predicted, and he seems unable to do anything about it, and a balance of payments deficit, which is very serious and has been a serious problem at the heart of the British economic difficulty for some time.
They can't keep on doing this. What do they do next time and the time after? If we have to keep forcing our interest rates up like this, business will simply not be able to survive it. It will be very damaging indeed. And in the meantime, the real problems are not being solved.
Both Mr Smith and Mr Beath say they hope this isn't going to mean a rise in the mortgage interest rate. They say that homeowners have been hit quite hard enough already. And even if the mortgage rate doesn't go up, this new announcement about interest rates certainly isn't going to do the Conservatives any favours as they enter the European elections. Michael Brunson, ITN, Westminster.
A senior police officer has warned that last night's riots in Wolverhampton could be the first sign of an explosion of American-style gangland violence connected with a potent cocaine-based drug known as crack. It's highly addictive, making huge profits for its dealers, and last night's running battles involving 500 youths were sparked by a police raid on alleged crack dealers. This morning, the West Midlands Deputy Chief Constable Paul Leopold said the violence was inevitable as dealers tried to protect their profits.
The rioters set fire to a local community building during the rampage, leaving it almost gutted. After police had arrested 20 people in the Travellers' Rest public house and seized substantial amounts of cannabis and a cocaine-based derivative called crack being sold on the premises. Hundreds of officers were involved in the operation. A senior policeman defended their tactics, saying they were determined to fight the growing drugs threat.
I can assure you that the West Midlands Police will not be deterred in dealing with these offences because of this activity. We shall work very hard to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. But nevertheless, we will deal with the drugs dealers and we will take action firmly, fairly and properly.
Local community leaders said while they fully backed the arrest of drugs dealers, they accused the police of causing the riot by their methods.
policing is still as aggressive and heavy-handed as it ever was, and that is a problem.
Well, would you anticipate further trouble?
I hope not. I hope not. I don't think that the people in this town have got any interest in riots and confrontation.
A local shopkeeper whose shop was looted said there was a long delay before the police came to help him.
What I want to know is what took them 2 hours to come on the precinct. As you can see, my shop damaged. What lifetime work is ruined within a few minutes.
The pub's been boarded up for now. Its manager has been taken away for his own safety. Mark Webster, ITN, Wolverhampton.
We turn now to the sudden and dramatic deterioration in relations between Britain and the Soviet Union over allegations of spying. Here, the government still refuses to say what the Russians we are expelling were doing. Some reports say they were trying to steal industrial secrets, and one Sheffield MP, the Conservative Irvin Patnick, is pressing the government to reveal the full extent of what the Soviets were doing. In Moscow, where well over 100 Britons now face expulsion, the British ambassador has been telling senior executives of the organisations concerned what that means. This report from our correspondent there, Ian Glover-James, who is one of the newsmen himself facing expulsion.
British businessmen were called to the embassy in Moscow just an hour ago to hear from the ambassador just what's happening in the row over new quotas on the British presence here. The embassy on the banks of the Moscow River is within shouting distance of the Kremlin on the other side, but today no one's listening. Instead, they're hoisting the red flag for the opening tomorrow of the new Soviet parliament. The delegates streamed from their hotels for the Kremlin early today, conscious they were making history as the first democratically elected representatives since the Russian Revolution. But if Russia's turning its back on Cold War politics with the West, the row with Britain is a particular shock. The threat to cut Britons working here and their Russian staff would hit hard. Rupert Cornwell is the Moscow correspondent for the Independent newspaper. His Russian secretary is indispensable.
Problems of dealing with the bureaucracy here, the administration, I honestly don't know how I would cope.
The quota row is a shock to both
I
sides.
thought somehow the Cold War was going to the end, and such things, that the fact that such things might happen shows us that the situation on the whole is rather fragile, let us say. Well, it's a pity.
The rift, which started 5 days ago with the expulsion of 11 Soviets from London charged with spying, has now escalated into threats to cut hundreds of Russians working in London and hundreds of Britons working here and their Russian staff. It's an ugly row which shows the warm Anglo-Soviet relations seen during Mr. Gorbachev's visit to Britain last month were built on slender foundations. Ian Glover-James, ITN, Moscow.
Well, here, our diplomatic editor John Snow has been talking this morning to senior Foreign Office officials. He's with me now. John, first of all, do we now know any more about what those Soviets here were up to?
Well, in a word, officially, no. The Foreign Office, Downing Street, every government department you talk to officially is saying absolutely nothing on the precise details of what they were caught doing.
Well, one of this morning's newspapers here, huge cash offers were touted by a platoon of agents carrying suitcases of money. Any truth in that?
Well, officials in various departments in Whitehall are pretty dismissive of that particular story. There is the main sense in Whitehall is that what we're really talking about is a collective clutch of evidence which reconstitutes the KGB activity as it was before 1985, and that what really has happened is that the KGB is back in its old guise, doing all the sorts of things which collectively combine, in the words of Sir Geoffrey Howe, to present a national security problem for the United Kingdom.
Is it a case, do you think, of the Soviets not being able to control their own KGB?
Well, that's the big question, and that's the question the government doesn't really know the answer to. The question is whether, in fact, even Mr. Gorbachev is in control enough to be able to say yay or nay to what the KGB gets up to. And to some extent, the Brits hope that this will become clear as a result of this crisis.
John, thanks very much indeed. Well, we turn now to that other major communist capital, Beijing in China, where it is now 5 days since martial law was declared. But life for many people is returning to normal. And although there are still some students camped out in Tiananmen Square, gone is the tension that gripped the city for the past few days.
The army finally made it to Tiananmen Square, though they came in peace
to raise the national flag for the first time since martial law was introduced. A clean new portrait of Chairman Mao had already replaced the picture damaged by yesterday's paint throwers. The refuse wagon swept through the square as Beijing tried to restore a sense of order. Traffic police were back on duty for the first time in a week as the city returned to normality. In the spring sunshine, the camp of occupation looked more like a country fair. Food and drink vendors were doing good business. The hunger strike was finished, if not forgotten. 2 grandmothers had set up a free soup kitchen. They felt sorry for the students still camped out after 12 days. Everyone had pictures of this historic site, except the government. Their spy cameras had been covered up. But as the camp took on an air of permanence, it was clear the students weren't evacuating yet.
The students' movement has already achieved or overachieved its aim. That's to arouse the people and all citizens from Beijing.
The noose was aimed at Premier Li Peng. The students say they won't leave until he is dismissed. But the moderates haven't won yet. The old revolutionaries are still hanging on. In the complex world of Chinese politics, nobody is yet sure what to believe. Jeremy Thompson, ITN, Beijing.
Back home, has the government ignored children in its shake-up of the health service? The Shadow Health Minister, Harriet Harman, says child health care is not listed in the White Paper as one of the core services which a health authority must provide. That is despite the fact that the very young, together with the very old, use the health service more than any other age group.
This children's ward at a district hospital in southeast London may not look much, but the experts believe it's offering the best care available. Parents stay with their children at all times, even overnight, and help with nursing. Community links are excellent. Children are released from hospital quickly, and chronically sick children can be cared for at home, because nurses from the hospital will go to visit them every day. Also being built is a care by parent unit, where all nursing will be done by parents. But under the reforms, there are fears that this standard of care could disappear. The White Paper doesn't say children's wards must be provided locally. Parents and very sick children may have to travel long distances to remote hospitals. Budget-conscious health authorities may shop around for the cheapest care rather than the best. And GPs may have far less time to spend with children if they have to increase patient numbers. The Dean of Great Ormond Street's medical school says personally he thinks child health care will deteriorate.
Well, we could end up with a service that is entirely market-dominated, where really it's only the cheapest form of care that counts. Having to travel if you're acutely ill, obviously that could be very serious indeed. I don't want to go shroud waving, but it obviously is a real worry. And if children in the community have people looking after them who don't know what the hospital doctor wants to happen, then things may happen that are really not in their best interest.
Today, Labour's health spokesman, Harriet Harman, at Great Ormond Street Hospital, called on ministers to shelve the plans until they'd consulted the experts. But a few minutes ago, the health minister told ITN the government was now committed to providing local children's units.
The only example I can think of where a hospital might not provide children's services is if there were 2 or 3 hospitals in one urban centre, and you wouldn't necessarily require every hospital to provide the same sort of service. They don't now. But children's hospital services have to be provided locally. That's an imperative with us, and I'm glad to have the opportunity of making that absolutely categorically clear.
In the Channel Islands, they're still very much in a festive mood as the royal tour continues. This morning, it was Alderney's turn to greet the Queen. The sun was shining and the crowds turned out in their hundreds. Alderney has not had a day like it in years. This afternoon, the Royal Yacht Britannia moves on to Sark, the smallest of the islands, with a way of life that's so different, even cars are banned.
A massive fireworks display lit up the sky over St. Peter Port last night as Guernsey said its farewells. Despite the rivalry between the islands, they'd asked a Jerseyman to stage this display, and he did them proud. By breakfast time this morning, Britannia had arrived in the huge natural harbour of Alderney, the most northerly of the Channel Islands. The Queen and Prince Philip passing Alderney's lifeboat and landing by launch at the same slipway used by Queen Victoria a century ago. During the occupation, all but a handful of islanders were evacuated. Today, many of those who'd returned in 1945 were among the crowds on the main street. But even in this tiny community, there were some who never came back. This morning, though, was a time for smiles. The royal couple frequently stopping to chat, especially when the Queen noticed a fellow corgi enthusiast. And then, all too soon, they were sailing again, this time for the car-free island of Sark. Robert Hall, ITN, Alderney.
One of Britain's best-loved sportsmen is in the news today. Front page headline, no less, in the Star. He's getting his own chat show on television, as you can see. So what is he doing on a pantomime stage in the West End? Let's find out. Frank, good morning.
Good morning, John Boy. It's good afternoon, but I'll let you off, John Boy.
Fair enough. I'll accept that. What are you doing on a pantomime stage?
I'm being Wishy-Washy's minder, you know, with Michael Barrymore.
Wishy-Washy's minder? What exactly does that entail?
I'm not too sure. I'm just being his minder and ducking and diving and doing this and doing that on the stage. On the Dominion Theatre here.
Sounds fairly familiar to what you've been doing for several years past, ducking and diving and weaving around a bit.
You ain't lying about that, and this is going to help me pay for the light bills and the mortgage and things like that, you know.
Do you have to throw any punches on stage?
A few slaps, you know, not a few punches, a few slaps.
Who will be the unlucky recipient?
Well, it's Barrett and Michael.
Will you survive it?
Yeah, I'm hoping that I'm going to survive him as well, you know, because he's a sharp character as well.
You'll be gentle on him, no doubt.
Well, I hope he'll be gentle on me because, as I said, he's very, very sharp.
Now, Frank, we've interviewed you on this programme many times before, always before one of your big bouts.
Yes, John.
You're now getting your own BBC programme.
Yeah.
You're on the pantomime stage. Is your boxing career over?
No, not really, John. You're asking for exclusive and you think you're on 1 o'clock so you can catch me out. I'm not too sure what's going to happen. I don't know what tomorrow may bring, but this playing thing is opening doors to other things, and them other things might open doors to other things, so I'm just ducking and diving at the moment, and I'm not too sure what I'll be doing. I'm just having a wonderful time getting the suntan and enjoying myself at the moment.
Are you after a refight with Mike Tyson? Would you like that?
If the opportunity comes along, John, I will take it, but at the moment I've just got to relax and recharge and see what comes up.
What about training? I mean, doesn't this sort of thing seriously get in the way of training?
I've been doing training a little bit every day, you know, like I've been running, doing a little bit of aerobics here and there, riding my bike, walking, and this is training even talking to you because under these lights are very, very hot, John. Very, very hot, but it's all good exercise and I'm just trying to enjoy myself, if you know what I mean. What
might it lead to? I mean, more celebrity status, more programmes?
I'm not too sure, John, you know, I mean, if I was a genie and I could rub my sort of like lamp now, I could wish for a lot of things, but I just got to see what comes along and be grateful for whatever comes along. Because you never know, if you know what I mean, John Boy.
I think that's going to catch on somehow. Good to talk to you, Frank. Yeah. Always a pleasure to talk to you. No doubt we'll be talking to you again before your next big fight. Who knows?
Thank you very much, John. Take it easy.
Thanks for joining us.
Nice one.
Frank Bruno, who else? Still with sport, cricket. Now there's a word that will have you on the edge of your seat, or alternatively, put you to sleep. If you're one of those to whom cricket is a bewildering world of maidens, slips, googlies and silly mid-offs, just wait till you hear the latest cricketing controversy. It concerns the seam on the cricket ball. There's a new type of ball on which the seam is 0.1 of a millimetre higher than on the old ball. It's deadly serious, and tonight the captains of England and Australia will meet to decide which ball to use in this summer's Ashes series. Giles Smith reports on what I can't resist calling an unseemly row.
When the Australians were thrashed in 2 days by Worcester, many blamed the pitch. Others looked beyond to the new Reader ball being used this year by most counties. It doesn't look much different to the BCB ball at the bottom here, but critics say it gives an undue advantage to seam bowlers. The traditional ball seam is anything between 0.5 and 0.9 millimetres in height, according to the regulations, but in practice about halfway between. The new Reader ball tends to be close to the top figure, say critics, and has a thicker flax stitching, which makes the seam larger. The critics say that while good bowlers can move the old ball a bit off the seam, even moderate bowlers can make the new one move dramatically. We asked John Lever, one of the country's most experienced bowlers, to test the two. The results were circumstantially dramatic. Trying to bowl the same delivery, Lever produced a little movement off the seam with the BCB ball. But with the Reader, again trying to bowl the same sort of delivery, the movement away was far more pronounced.
It's obviously a larger seam on the Reader, and quite a few of our batsmen have said so, and they'd rather go back to the other balls.
It does seem to be favouring fast bowling enormously, and this ball, this Reader ball with larger stitching, seems to be tilting it even more so in their direction.
At Readers, they deny there's anything different about the balls. They say they're still using traditional production techniques. The only difference, the balls are stronger and last longer.
I think it's a storm in a teacup, and frankly, we have got the business because of our product being liked by the players and the counties.
David Gower for England will probably want to use this Reader ball in the tests. Alan Border for the Australians probably won't. That'll mean it'll be decided on the toss of a coin. If the Reader ball comes out of that, it could be a big advantage for England, who have the sort of bowlers who can exploit it. But the test could be over earlier than expected. Giles Smith, ITN Sport, Lords.
Well, even if cricket doesn't interest you, that surely must. And even if cricket doesn't interest you, the captain of England's cricket team this year, David Gower, is likely to interest you. I've been to see him and I've conducted a very long interview with him. And the one thing we didn't talk much about was cricket. He's a wildlife photographer and he loves wine. I'll be showing you that interview on the eve of the first test. I hope you won't miss it. For now, the main news again. The cost of borrowing is on the way up again, with bank interest rates increased to 14%. But mortgages should not be affected. Building societies say they should be able to cope. Mrs Thatcher told a Tory women's conference in London that high interest rates were better than high inflation. She said while the effects can be uncomfortable, the effects on continued high inflation can be much worse and they would last longer. And a senior police officer has warned of more riots similar to that in Wolverhampton last night. And that's News at 1. Stay tuned for the weather. Do join me at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Till then, bye-bye.
Good afternoon. More hot and sticky weather to come for southern Britain. These winds across the continent still feeding all the warm air in there from the southeast. But up here to the northwest, some cooler, fresher westerly winds trying to get in towards western and northern Scotland. During this afternoon, that should get into most of northern Scotland, down into central parts. But as you can see, much of England and Wales, another warm, sticky, hot day. Temperatures high 70s, up even into the 80s down in the southeast. During tomorrow, I think we'll find that cooler air creeping southwards in towards northern England, Northern Ireland too, but central and southern England staying hot, staying sticky. Temperatures again reaching 80 in a few places. Now, where those two areas of cooler and warmer air meet, we have a band of cloud and rain. This is where we expect it to be by the end of the afternoon, southern parts of Northern Ireland and through the border counties of Scotland. To the north of that, the last of the rain clearing away, really quite a pleasant day. Just 1 or 2 showers up in Shetland. Over England and Wales, well, there's been some thundery showers in the West Country, moving up now into the Midlands and onto the Pennines. Likely to last, I think, through the afternoon, with a fair amount of hazy sunshine, though, for most places. Overnight tonight, the cooler air and the band of rain moving a little bit further south into northern parts of England, leaving the rest of England and Wales still with a few thundery showers, a few fog patches too, but another warm and really quite sticky night down in the south. Much cooler and fresher in Northern Ireland and Scotland, just the odd shower in Shetland. Tomorrow then, how does it look? Not a great deal of change. There's that band of cloud and just the odd outbreak of rain left across Northern England. Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, a fine, fresh day with a good deal of sunshine. Just the odd shower sneaking across northern parts. England and Wales, another day like today. Thundery showers developing from time to time, chiefly in western and central parts. But still in all, there should be a fair amount of sunshine to share around. Well, that's it from me for the moment. I'll leave you now with the summary chart.
Hello, now a roundup of news from around the region. Police in the northwest are investigating 8 cases of contaminated sweets. Slivers of glass were found in packets of nerds in Liverpool, Wirral and North Wales. Anglo Bellamy, which makes the sweets, has set up a hotline for parents to ring if they're worried. It's 01 388 3898. British Nuclear Fuels has dismissed a magazine article about safety at Sellafield in Cumbria as alarmist and exaggerated. Time Out magazine alleged that fuel rods stored at Sellafield were corroding more quickly than expected, posing a risk of radioactive material leaking into the Irish Sea. But BNFL says it's satisfied there isn't a problem with the rods, and it says there's no truth in allegations that the operation of Britain's advanced gas-cooled reactors may have to be suspended because of lack of storage space. A family of 5 taken to hospital after a fire this morning now face the prospect of having to be rehoused. Their home in Dorset Road, Atherton, was badly damaged by the blaze early this morning. The father and 3 children aged between 1 and 5 escaped, but the mother was trapped inside and had to be rescued by firemen. All 5 were affected by smoke but were released from hospital after treatment. At the inquiry into the Hillsborough disaster, the South Yorkshire police officer who planned the police operation on the day has come under intensive questioning about events at the Sheffield Wednesday Stadium. Christine Ruth reports.
Chief Superintendent Brian Mole came back to Sheffield Town Hall today to continue his evidence to Lord Justice Taylor's inquiry, and he came under close questioning by counsel Andrew Collins. Having told the hearing that police plans did not allow for the late arrival of large numbers of fans, Mr. Mole was asked about the lessons learned following an incident in 1981 when a great many arrived late together. Tottenham scored after just 3 minutes. The late arrivals surged forward and the perimeter fences were opened to release fans who had broken limbs and ribs. He said the scenario was similar and was borne in mind. Mr. Mole said if he was faced with large numbers of fans with tickets arriving late at the ground, he would seriously have considered delaying the start of the match. Explaining why police and stewards were not on duty on the terraces themselves, Mr. Mole said the flexibility of deployment of his officers allowed him to respond to any problem. As to stewards, he said stewards in general were not willing to put themselves on Liverpool terraces. The inquiry continues.
Staff at Liverpool's passport office are staging a lunchtime protest over the Home Office's refusal to remove 4 workers. They say the Home Office should recall staff who've been seconded from London to help with a 3-month backlog in passport applications. Union officials want the jobs to go to Liverpool workers, but the Home Office says the London staff will stay until replacements are trained. Liverpool are within sight of the League Championship after a decisive 5-1 victory over West Ham at Anfield last night. It means they're on the brink of making history by achieving the 2nd League and Cup double for the 2nd time in 3 years, as Gillian Bancroft reports.
Anfield was packed for the return of the FA Cup heroes, and the Reds were quickly on top, taking the lead in the 20th minute.
Brilliant goal by Aldridge. Good football from West Ham. Now Ward. Dickens, let it go, Rosenia! Fine goal, they've equalised.
In the second half, Liverpool stepped up into top gear, leaving no doubt about which was the better side.
Lovely run by Houghton. Yes! Houghton gives Liverpool the lead. Beardsley's dispossessed him and Houghton is unmarked in the middle. He could finish off West Ham here. He has. Houghton's 2nd goal of the game. Rush wants a bit of the action as well, and Rush might get some of the action. He has. Liverpool's 4th. Still Barnes. The shot deflected and it's gone in. It's 5.
Arsenal now have the unenviable task of having to win by 2 clear goals this Friday to prevent the Reds claiming the championship. Just a draw would be enough for Liverpool.
Well done, Liverpool.